Good afternoon. You're watching AnewZ. I'm Dilek Tuna. These are the headlines. A man attacks a Colorado crowd with firebombs where 8 people were injured. Russia and Ukraine are to meet again for peace talks in Istanbul today. Baku Energy Week opens in the capital of Azerbaijan with 267 companies from 39 countries. A peaceful demonstration in Boulder, Colorado turned violent on the first week of June when a man attacked participants with incendiary devices, injuring 8 elderly individuals. The FBI is now investigating the incident as an act of terrorism.
On the 1st June, a violent attack occurred during a peaceful demonstration in Boulder, Colorado, organised to honour Israeli hostages held in Gaza. A 45-year-old man, Mohammed Sabri Soliman, allegedly threw incendiary devices and used a makeshift flamethrower on participants. 8 injured aged between 67 and 88 years old were transported to hospitals. The FBI is investigating the incident as an act of terrorism.
Sadly, attacks like this are becoming too common across the country. This is an example of how perpetrators of violence continue to threaten communities across our nation. It's our job, the FBI, the Boulder Police, and our law enforcement and community partners, to bring these criminals to justice and keep our communities safe.
The demonstration, known as Run for Their Lives, is a weekly event held by the Jewish community to raise awareness for hostages taken during Hamas's attack on Israel. Witnesses reported that Soliman shouted, "Free Palestine," during the attack. He was apprehended at the scene and is currently in custody.
It's very scary and it's a huge shock. And it's a big thing that, sadly we've experienced before, but it's really scary and it's really upsetting that it's happening in Boulder.
This incident has heightened concerns over rising anti-Semitic violence in the US, especially amid ongoing tensions related to the Israel-Gaza conflict. Officials, including Colorado Governor Jared Polis, have condemned the attack as hate-fueled and unacceptable.
China is slow-rolling a trade deal with the United States as the Trump administration works to negotiate new agreements with several major trade partners, said Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. President Donald Trump on Friday accused China of violating an agreement with the US to mutually roll back tariffs and trade restrictions for critical minerals. Trump added he was sure that he would soon speak to Chinese President Xi Jinping to discuss trade and other issues. More trade talks between the US and the EU are scheduled for this week on the sidelines of the OECD Ministerial Council meeting in Paris on the 3rd and 4th of June. Preparations are underway as Russia and Ukraine are set to hold their second round of direct peace talks today in Istanbul, with the meeting scheduled for 1 p.m. at the Chiran Palace. Security was tight around the venue this morning as both delegations arrived amid rising battlefield tensions. After days of uncertainty, President Zelensky confirmed that Defence Minister Rustem Umerov will lead the Ukrainian side. The first round of talks on May the 16th led to the largest prisoner swap of the war, 1,000 for 1,000, but little movement toward a ceasefire. The two sides remain far apart on how to end the conflict, despite mounting international pressure. US President Donald Trump has called on both to strike a deal, warning that Washington could withdraw its support if progress stalls. Ukraine says it has dealt a serious blow to Russia's air power with a large-scale drone strike deep inside Russian territory. The operation reportedly targeted multiple air bases and damaged dozens of warplanes in what Kyiv calls a turning point in its drone warfare strategy.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has hailed a major Ukrainian drone assault on Russian air bases as a brilliant operation, claiming it inflicted severe damage on Moscow's strategic aviation forces. Speaking in his nightly address on Sunday, Zelensky said the attack, over a year and a half in the making, involved more than 100 drones and was aimed exclusively at military targets.
Планування, організація, всі деталі були ідеально підготовлені. Planning, all the details were planned ideally. I can say with confidence that it is an absolutely unique operation. The most interesting part, and now I can talk about it publicly. The office of our operation on the Russian territory was based close to FSB department in one of its regions. 117 drones were used in the operation, and respective number of drone pilots were involved. 34% of strategic carriers of cruise missiles on their home airfields were hit. Our people worked in different Russian regions in 3 time zones. Our people, on the eve of the operation, were extracted from the Russian territory. Now they are in safety.
Діяли наші люди на території різних російських регіонів.
The operation, codenamed Spider's Web, was conducted by Ukraine's domestic security agency, the SBU. According to Ukrainian officials, the long-range strikes hit 4 separate air bases and damaged or destroyed 40 Russian warplanes, including many cruise missile carriers. It marks the most devastating Ukrainian drone attack since the war began. Images released by the SBU show dozens of quadcopter drones stored in wooden sheds with metal roofs, designed to conceal their presence until launch. Ukrainian sources told media that these drone containers were trucked close to the airfields and equipped with remotely controlled roof mechanisms, allowing the drones to take off at the push of a button. The SBU estimates the damage caused to be in the range of $7 billion. Moscow has acknowledged drone strikes in 5 Russian regions, labelling them a terrorist act. In a parallel development, Ukrainian authorities reported a massive overnight Russian assault, involving 472 drones and 7 ballistic and cruise missiles targeting Ukrainian territory. These events unfold as Russian and Ukrainian negotiators prepare to meet in Istanbul on Monday for a second round of peace talks.
A tight presidential runoff in Poland has ended, with Karol Nawrocki winning the country's presidency. His victory is set to influence the nation's political direction and ties with Europe.
Karol Nawrocki has narrowly defeated Liberal Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski in Poland's presidential runoff, securing 50.89% of the vote, according to the National Electoral Commission. Trzaskowski, the candidate of the ruling Civic Coalition, garnered 49.11%. Nawrocki, a conservative historian backed by the opposition Law and Justice Party, campaigned on nationalist themes, pledging to defend traditional values and resist reforms proposed by Prime Minister Donald Tusk's centrist government. With the power to veto legislation, his presidency is expected to complicate the ruling coalition's efforts to push through policy changes. Early exit polls had suggested a narrow lead for Trzaskowski, prompting brief celebrations among his supporters. But as more data came in, the trend reversed, showing just how divided the electorate remains.
Everything was on a knife edge. We will see what this brings us. Feelings are for sure mixed at the moment. But how small this margin was, it tells us how divided we are, almost split in half as voters. This is very interesting and also gives food for thought.
I am very sad and disappointed that Poland, that the Polish nation chose this way.
I am happy with the outcome, and that's all I can say. I expected something like this. I hope it continues like this.
Nawrocki will take office on August 6, succeeding fellow Conservative Andrzej Duda. As Poland navigates a period of political tension, the president's role will be key in shaping the country's direction, both domestically and in its relations with the European Union.
Joining us now live is Anna Evans, political analyst from Lisbon. Good afternoon, Anna. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Hello.
Now,
thank you.
How might the election outcome affect Poland's relationships with key Western allies, especially the US and neighbouring EU countries?
Well, what we know so far is that the winning president is close to President Trump in the United States. During the electoral campaign, the new Polish president, who comes from the Law and Justice Party, the conservative right, he had a brief meeting with President Donald Trump and a thumbs up for the media. So it seems clear that they have a good relationship, a good working relationship, and you know the probability is that the new president Nawrocki will work well with President Trump. As for the European Union, well, the scenario is rather different because, as we remember, the European Union actually sued Poland and withdrew a lot of financial assets, money from the European Union when the European Union in the former Law and Justice Party time considered that the government was interfering with independent judicial power and appointing a lot of political judges. Well, later the European Union reversed course, but what happens now is that we have a new president which comes from the same Law and Justice Party, and this party has had not only this issue that the European Union was seriously against its policies in the previous government, but also the whole narrative of the party has been a bit anti-European, more nationalist. So we could say that, for example, with regard to Ukraine, the difference on the field is not going to be that very notorious because the new president also supports helping Ukraine, but without ever getting Polish boots on the ground in Ukraine, which actually makes sense because Poland is a NATO country. However, you know, whilst the prime minister, which is from a coalition of centrist and leftist parties, believes in a very strong united front at the European level in political terms where Poland would be part of this very strong political Europe, the new president is kind of a successor to the outing president in terms of putting a brake on this attempt to make Poland be a part of a very united, very strong European core. So I would say that we expect to see that the president will try to tame with his veto power any legislation that is too much gearing towards Europe or to very liberal social aspects. Bear in mind that the president does not have a great actual power, so the power is more on a ceremonial basis, but the president has veto power, and meaning that legislation that the government coalition tries to pass can be blocked, vetoed, by this president, as has happened with the outgoing Duda president, right? And so by vetoing legislation, that's a way to block the government's attempts to liberalize social and, for example, judicial policy, or policy that it is too much European. So I would say these are the central aspects of what can happen next. Some easier talk with the United States, well, at least continuing talk with regard to the former president, the outgoing president, but some blockage of the government's policies. And this might have consequences domestically, because if the government is blocked constantly, then there is a risk that the government will suffer politically by not being able to implement its electoral promises. So this is a show that the opposition remains strong, notwithstanding some problems that the Law and Justice Party in the opposition has faced. And it is also a show that the government coalition is under serious pressure, because this means that 1 year after winning the elections, the results are not very nice for those who are in government.
Okay, Anna, just quickly, could this election outcome signal a resurgence or fatigue in right-wing populism across Central and Eastern Europe?
Well, I would say that it really depends on the status quo parties. You see, the problem is that the status quo parties, not only in Eastern Europe, but also in Western Europe, bear in mind that in Portugal we've had very, very recent elections, and in these recent elections, for the first time, our radical right-wing party has reached number 2, so the second place in terms of votes and elected parliamentarians. And so this is historical. And what this means is that the status quo parties are not able to communicate to their electors that they really are solving the critical problems that the electors face. And in political science, we study that the more there is inequality, the more there are social gaps, the more there are problems of the middle class and lowering expectations, the more explosive nationalist narratives or anti-migration narratives become. So the easier it will become to resort to successful and efficacy populist narratives. And this is what we are seeing. Apparently, the status quo parties are not being able to address the middle classes' real preoccupations and the problems that working people are facing at the end of the month. And this is a problem. So I would say it really depends a lot on the capacity of the status quo parties to move on and hear the society and hear the real concerns and adjust their policies and narratives to those concerns. I think this is what these electoral results are showing us.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna. We're running a little bit short of time. Thanks for joining us on the program today.
Thank you.
Now, South Koreans are heading to the polls next week in a snap presidential election following the dramatic ousting of former leader Yoon Suk-yeol. But as candidates are ramping up their campaigns, concerns are growing that political divisions are overshadowing serious policy debate.
South Korea is heading into a snap presidential election, and voters are facing a race heavy on politics but light on policy. Supporters of the two leading candidates, the conservative Kim Moon-soo and the liberal Lee Jae-myung, are rallying across the country. But experts are saying what's missing is knowing what the two candidates will actually do. Park Kyung-jun, head of the Korean Association for Policy Studies, is saying voters aren't getting enough to judge how pledges will affect their lives.
Voters should be able to assess how a pledge affects them personally and make choices accordingly. Something like, this candidate's policy will impact me in this way, so I'll vote for them. But we saw very little of that.
Even this week, most candidates are only releasing summaries. Full policy booklets are landing just days before early voting, and on key issues like foreign policy and national security, experts say candidates are staying vague. Professor Nam Tae-woo is saying many are dodging tough questions, especially on foreign policy with the US, China, and Japan.
Foreign policy and national security are areas where we're seeing generational divides and complex concerns. But many candidates seem to be avoiding clear positions on these in their pledges.
It's also been a notable issue. There's no female presidential candidate for the first time in nearly 2 decades. And on the streets of Seoul, the message from voters is clear. They want more focus on real-world issues such as housing and inflation.
This is ignoring the voices of the many women who braved the freezing cold and spent nights in the square demanding the restoration of democracy.
I wish they had taken housing supply and boosting domestic market more seriously in their pledges, but perhaps because it's a snap election, that kind of in-depth consideration seems to be missing, which is a bit disappointing.
turnout is already breaking early voting records, and with election day set for the 3rd of June, many are heading to the polls, still looking for answers after months of political chaos.
The Philippines and the European Union have agreed to start formal talks on defence and security cooperation.
The Philippines and the European Union have agreed to open a security and defence dialogue focused on joint action against cyber attacks, foreign interference and disinformation. The announcement came during EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas's visit to Manila, where she met Foreign Secretary Enrique Manalo and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
That through the security and defense dialogue, we will remain proactive and united in addressing emerging security threats and challenges that transcend borders, cyber attacks, and foreign interference and manipulation of information.
Kallas also reiterated the EU's position against the use of coercion or unilateral actions in disputed regions, including the South China Sea.
The European Union is a firm believer in international law. And in the international law, we have agreed certain principles. We have the UNCLOS, we have the maritime security arrangements and the rules there. So we reject any unilateral changes to the status quo, including use of coercion.
The EU has been increasing its presence in the Indo-Pacific amid growing tensions with China, which claims large areas of the South China Sea, overlapping with several Southeast Asian nations' maritime zones, including the Philippines.
2 people are dead, a police officer is in a coma, and nearly 600 have been arrested across France, following celebrations of Paris Saint-Germain's first ever Champions League win.
2 people died and hundreds were arrested during chaotic celebrations across France after Paris Saint-Germain's first Champions League title win. The night began with jubilant scenes in Paris and other cities, but turned violent in several areas, prompting a large-scale police response. A 17-year-old boy was stabbed to death during celebrations in the town of Dax. In Paris, a 23-year-old man died after his scooter was struck by a car. Police said both incidents are under investigation. In Coutances, a police officer was gravely injured by fireworks and placed in a medically induced coma. Officials reported 192 injuries nationwide, including 4 people in serious condition. In Paris, crowds gathered around the Eiffel Tower, the Champs-Élysées and the Parc des Princes Stadium. While most fans celebrated peacefully, clashes broke out overnight. Police used tear gas and water cannons to disperse groups throwing fireworks and other objects. 2 cars were torched and 4 shops looted, according to local authorities. By Sunday morning, 559 arrests had been made across the country, including 491 in the capital. Police say many of those detained were carrying fireworks or involved in vandalism. In another incident in Grenoble, a car drove into PSG supporters, injuring 4 members of the same family. 2 were seriously hurt. Police believe the crash was not intentional. Despite the unrest, PSG's victory parade is set to go ahead Sunday afternoon. Central Paris remains under tight security, with thousands of police officers deployed and road closures in place.
Scientists say climate change is no longer a future threat. It's here and it's heating up our world faster than expected. A new report warns that extreme heat is affecting billions of people, while in Europe leaders are preparing a major climate target for 2040, but not without controversy.
A stark warning from scientists this week: human-caused climate change is making the world hotter, faster. Over the past year alone, half of the global population experienced 30 additional days of extreme heat. A new report from World Weather Attribution, Climate Central, and the Red Cross Climate Centre finds that heat waves are becoming more frequent, more intense, and more deadly. The researchers say climate change has doubled the number of extreme heat days in 195 countries. They call it an underappreciated threat, one that many governments still underestimate. The findings come just days before Heat Action Day, urging global leaders to take extreme heat seriously. The report recommends better monitoring, stronger early warning systems, and the rollout of heatwave action plans. The findings come just days before Heat Action Day, urging global leaders to take extreme heat seriously. The report recommends better monitoring, stronger early warning systems, and the rollout of heatwave action plans. But while scientists raise the alarm, European politicians face growing backlash over green policies. The European Commission plans to unveil a new climate target in July. Diplomats say Brussels wants to include flexibilities in the proposal. That can mean lower emission targets for domestic industries or allowing countries to buy international carbon credits to make up the difference. Some nations back the plan, like Finland, the Netherlands and Denmark, whilst others, including Italy and the Czech Republic, remain opposed. With Europe warming faster than ever, the balance between environmental action and economic costs remains under fierce debate.
Airlines are facing economic headwinds. The International Air Transport Association has revised its 2025 profit forecast downward, citing trade tensions, delivery delays and rising operational costs, all while passengers may end up footing the bill.
At its annual meeting in New Delhi, the International Air Transport Association said the global airline industry is now expected to post a net profit of $36 billion in 2025, a slight downgrade from earlier projections. But the real concern is the narrow margin.
Lovely figure, very big by any measure, but when you translate that into margin, it's a margin of 3.7%, and that remains a wafer-thin margin for the airline industry.
That fragile buffer is being tested by multiple pressures, from a surge in maintenance costs to continued delays in new aircraft deliveries. Walsh says many carriers are forced to keep older, less efficient planes flying, increasing fuel burn and emissions. On top of that, growing protectionism and tariffs are adding further strain. The question now, who absorbs those costs?
When I look at this, I see that consumers are going to have to end up paying for any higher costs that the industry faces. We would prefer not to be in this environment.
Walsh also warned that replacing global suppliers with domestic ones is not a realistic solution, urging governments to keep aircraft and engines out of tariff regimes.
The Zangazour Corridor will support the Middle Transport Corridor. This was stated by the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure of Turkey, Abdulkadir Uraloğlu, speaking at the conference International Corridors and Turkey. Uraloğlu emphasized the strategic importance of the Zangazour Corridor in bolstering the Middle Corridor trade route. He announced that the construction of the 224-kilometre Kars-Iğdır Aralık Dilucu railway line is set to commence by the end of this year, with an expected completion timeline of 5 years. This railway will connect Kars to the Dilucu border crossing, enhancing Turkey's connectivity with Azerbaijan and Central Asia. At the Astana International Forum, Kazakhstan placed strong emphasis on the Trans-Caspian international transport route, part of the broader Middle Corridor linking China to Europe via Central Asia, the Caspian Sea and the South Caucasus. As traditional trade routes face disruption, is this land-sea corridor becoming a vital new artery for global trade? To discuss this topic, we're joined now live from Astana, Kazakhstan, by Richard Spooner, a member of the advisory board at the Caspian Policy Center in Washington, D.C. Richard, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much for having me.
So what makes the Middle Corridor and specifically the Trans-Caspian route so strategically important for Kazakhstan right now?
I would say that the Middle Corridor for Kazakhstan is an enormous gift of fate. This is a chance for Kazakhstan to develop its infrastructure, to develop its transportation logistics, and all of this is because of the attention being paid to the Middle Corridor, investments from China, desire from Europe to have this new route for goods come from China all the way to Europe.
Okay. And how do regional and geopolitical factors like tensions with Russia or China's Belt and Road influence the corridor's appeal?
I think we could say that tensions with Russia are the reason that the corridor has become so important. Europe looking for a way to receive goods from China without going through Russia. The United States, at least in the previous administration, supported this very strongly. So the tensions with Russia really are the reason why the corridor has become so important. I would say Europe and China both want this corridor to succeed, and so therefore the tensions that do exist between Europe and China over trade, over human rights, they are not in any way challenging the larger importance of the middle corridor. So Europe and China want the same thing on the middle corridor.
Okay. Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
My pleasure.
Now, Baku Energy Week kicks off in Azerbaijan's capital today, reaffirming the city's pivotal role on the global energy stage. Running from the 2nd till the 4th of June, the event marks its 30th edition, with a renewed focus on the intersection of traditional and renewable energy sectors. Our Andy Mioch has more.
The 30th anniversary Baku Energy Week has officially begun. The event brought together more than 200 companies from over 30 countries. One of the major events of the week, the Caspian Oil and Gas Exhibition, has begun after a keynote address by the Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, as well as remarks by the representatives of the US, Turkey, the UK and the EU. In his speech, Aliyev reminded of the inaugural 1994 exhibition, after which the deal of the century, as it's called, was signed between Azerbaijan and a consortium of oil and gas companies. Aliyev said that without natural resources, Azerbaijan would not be able to overcome all the difficulties of the time and could not be truly independent, saying that today oil and gas make up a little over 30% of Azerbaijan's GDP. Aliyev also said that the country will increase the production of gas and oil while simultaneously investing with its partners into green energy.
Last year at Baku Energy Week, several contracts of a total of 1,000 megawatt of green energy was signed. This time, also several contracts of several hundred megawatts of green energy will be signed. So we are continuing on that path.
Following the speech of the Azerbaijani president, we also heard remarks from the guests. An official of the U.S. State Department carried a message from U.S. President Donald Trump, who said that the two countries have so far cooperated, quote, tremendously, and congratulated Azerbaijan and its president on the 30th anniversary of the oil and gas exhibition. The Turkish official carried the message of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, saying that the two countries have achieved many successes together in the energy sector, and that their cooperation does not only contribute to their own countries, but also to the region and to Europe. The representative of the European Commission then took the stand and spoke on Azerbaijan as a reliable partner in Europe's new energy chapter following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The representative of the European Commission spoke on the amounts of gas imported into the EU, saying that shipments of Russian gas have dropped from 45% in 2021 to 13% now. She also spoke on the need to co-develop and co-invest with Azerbaijan into green energy. The OPEC General Secretary was also here. He thanked Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Azerbaijan for hosting the COP29 climate conference and having its balanced approach between fossil fuels and the green energy. He said that petroleum and petroleum-derived products make up and continue to shape the world. He said that more and more oil and gas, but also green energy, basically all forms of energy are needed every year because of the growth of the population, the urbanization, and also the advancement of technologies such as the artificial intelligence. The Caspian Oil and Gas Exhibition is not the only event of this Energy Week. We also have the Caspian International Power and Green Energy Exhibition, also to be held here at the Baku Expo Center. And tomorrow and the day after tomorrow at the Baku Convention Center, the Baku Energy Forum will be hosted. For AnewZ from Baku, AnewZ.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has arrived in Egypt on a one-day visit and is scheduled to visit Lebanon on Tuesday on the second leg of his tour of the two Arab countries with which the Islamic Republic is readjusting its relations. Our Turaj Shiraliliu reports more from Tehran.
Foreign Minister Araghchi is expected to discuss bilateral ties, regional issues, as well as international developments in meetings with the high-ranking officials in Cairo and Beirut. In addition to meeting with his Egyptian counterpart, Badr Abdel-Atti, Iran's top diplomat will meet with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, according to an official statement released in Tehran. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai told a weekly press conference that Iran seeks to engage in serious and constructive discussions with Cairo and Beirut on how to confront the escalating crisis in Gaza, the broader implications of Israeli aggression, and the pursuit of regional stability through diplomacy. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran, diplomatic relations between Tehran and Cairo have not been fully restored, despite numerous attempts at a rapprochement. Egypt and Iran severed diplomatic relations in 1979, while they were partially resumed 11 years later. However, the restoration of communications did not equate to a full return to diplomatic ties, and interactions remained limited to business representatives and interest section missions in Cairo and Tehran. Araghchi's visit to Lebanon is also significant, as Tehran and Beirut are reviewing their ties in the wake of the September 2024 killing of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah movement in southern Beirut. Turaj Shiraliliu, reporting for AnewZ TV, Tehran.
Syria is hoping to revive its pharmaceutical industry after the US and EU lifted key sanctions.
In Syria, efforts are underway to revive the country's pharmaceutical industry following recent moves by the US and European Union to lift key sanctions. The restrictions, imposed during the civil war, had cut off access to raw materials, replacement parts and foreign partnerships, pushing the local drug industry into steep decline. The Ministry of Health estimates that only a fifth of the cancer drug demand could be met domestically. Many families were forced to seek treatment abroad or turn to costly alternatives on the black market. Now, with sanctions eased, manufacturers like Unipharma in Damascus say they've resumed talks with international suppliers to restart stalled production lines and begin importing critical ingredients. Before the war, Syria was considered a regional hub for medicine manufacturing. Officials hope the renewed access to equipment and materials will help rebuild that capacity and ease the burden on families who've struggled to find or afford treatment. However, while the latest moves open some doors, much of the global banking system remains off limits to Syria, and broader US sanctions still hang over the economy.
In a significant boost to Turkey's international defence profile, the country's leading defence firm Aselsan has been selected by the NATO Support and Procurement Agency to take part in a key air defence initiative. The project, known as the Modular Ground-Based Air Defence, or GBAD, brings together some of the world's top defence companies.
Turkish defense company Aselsan has joined four of the world's top defense giants: Airbus Defence and Space GmbH, Lockheed Martin UK, Raytheon, and Thales LAS in a major NATO initiative to develop modular air defense solutions. This selection marks a milestone for Turkey's defense industry and underscores Aselsan's growing international reputation. The NATO Support and Procurement Agency, or NSPA, says the five companies will begin with a concept study phase, focusing on system architecture. This foundational work will help shape the future of NATO's modular, flexible, and interoperable air defense infrastructure. Project deliverables are due by mid-September, when the most viable system designs will be evaluated. According to NATO officials, the agreement demonstrates both effective multinational coordination and the efficiency of NATO's internal procurement mechanisms. Each company will contribute independently, offering innovative perspectives and solutions in a competitive framework. The overall goal is to meet NATO's demanding operational and logistical requirements with systems that not only advanced, but also adaptable and sustainable. For Turkey, Aselsan's involvement serves as international validation of its indigenous capabilities in layered air defense. From barrel systems to a full spectrum of missile defense solutions, short, medium, and long range, Aselsan has positioned itself as a reliable and technologically mature defense partner. This step forward also supports NATO's ambition to become the preferred hub for multinational defense procurement, reinforcing collective security through shared innovation.
These were the updates for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to AnewZ.